Welcome to the RickGoldman podcast. I'm an author and I have a couple of books out right now, Child in Time and The Mars Runner. And with me is Jay Wynn. He's my producer and friend and accomplice in these deeds. The book that we're going to be giving out to you today, the prologue and the first chapter, is called The Galaxy Chasers. So let's do a little bit of introduction, let you know who I am. Jay, do you want to handle this part?
Sure. Hey, Rick. Thanks for joining us for the podcast today. I'm definitely thrilled to have the opportunity that so we can delve into the fascinating world and your journey as an author. Let's dive right in. So, can you tell me a little bit about what inspired you to write the sci-fi novel to start out with?
Sci-fi has always been in my blood. I've always been a sci-fi outer space type of, I wouldn't say fanatic, but about as close to that as you can get. I grew up in the early 60s with the space race and all the science fiction programs like Star Trek, Lost in Space, The Time Tunnel, all that kind of stuff. And I've always loved like H.G. Wells and Arthur C. Clarke and Ray Bradbury and Isaac Asimov and all of those people. They were my heroes of the time. And also, I'm from Binghamton, New York, which is also the hometown of Rod Serling. And I'll tell you, growing up in that kind of environment was just a hotbed for science fiction. I've always loved it.
That's wonderful. I remember coming to America and then get to know some of the references about I think the radio broadcast the first time was the War of the World. So how people freaked out when they first heard action through the radio. So very interesting. So uh, who would you think inspire you the most though through your writing journey?
I've read Heinlein. I've been through the Foundation trilogy about a million times. Star Trek, I think, was probably one of the biggest influences I had, going from planet to planet and seeing different things and different people. And that really is where the Galaxy Chasers kind of came into play for my idea, because it was just pure science fiction and it had no boundaries. I didn't have to explain how the galaxy drive worked in the same way that they never explained how the transporter really worked. I could talk about, different alien races and I could bring them all aboard and have all sorts of side shows going on with that, which were a lot of fun.
Yeah, this definitely was fun when I was listening to your book, The Galaxy Chaser. That was very fun. What an adventure that you created there.
Galaxy Chasers was different from Child in Time and the Mars Runner because it was just solid science fiction. And it just let my mind go crazy and I loved it.
Mm. Let's go back to your first book real quick. What was it like when you finished that book?
City in Space, it was just a sense of achievement. I mean, it was done during the pandemic, of course. It was the first one I wrote during the pandemic. And it reintroduced me to the joy of writing. And it was a lot of fun to be able to talk about people living on an asteroid trying to find a new home for the human race. That being the template, I learned an awful lot. And that's not published right now. I'm actually doing a rewrite on it, taking everything I've learned since then and incorporating it into that. The other stuff, like Child in Time, that was just a story that I really wanted to write about. And at first I thought it was going to be a comedy about, an older son and a younger father meeting each other and their lives together. But it actually took on a completely different story as we went on. It's got some humor in it, of course. You got a father that's been missing for 50 years and then he comes back and he has no idea what's happened since 1969, and it's 2019 and he is finding out, wow, what a different world this is.
Yeah, that was fun. How do you went about to create a dialogue between the father and son?
it was pretty crazy in the sense that I sat there making comments about, they're in the kitchen and they're looking at the different things that are in the kitchen and they're talking about, well, what's this stuff on the appliances? Oh, it's stainless steel, Dad. It's the rage these days. Is that a TV on your refrigerator? Yeah. Well, what's going on with that? I can see what's in the refrigerator. He goes, son, you don't know what's in your own refrigerator?
That is pretty funny. Yeah, even the coffee maker.
Yeah, there's a point where, is the first time he's talking about it. Well, the first time I used the coffee maker, I forgot to put the filter in it. And the
Yeah.
sun was spitting out coffee grounds the rest of the day. And, to anyone who's ever done something like that, you could probably see the humor in it.
I remember part of the book when the father woke up in the hospital, and the medical field has advanced so far nowadays that you can see so much on in the room, all of these technological stuff in the rooms. So back in the day, you just pretty much have the bed. There's nothing else in there. So
Yeah, he talked about it being Dr. McCoy's sick bay, and he was waiting for him to come up with that little salt shaker thingy that McCoy used to do, He's got a broken leg, Jim. And
yeah.
he's talking about them and taking his blood pressure and taking blood and getting upset that he still felt the prick of the needle when they were doing the blood test. But yeah, it was interesting because the premise of the story was he was ganghide into a suspended animation chamber for 50 years. And the only way he got out of it was an alarm went off and he was found. And at first they thought it was a bomb, so they called the bomb squad.
Hmm.
And then when they found out who it was, they called the man's son, and the son was 53 years old. And the man, the father, was from the 60s. So obviously he's going, whoa, man, was I tripping? And he's talking about that kind of stuff. And that was a lot of the fun. And we're going to get to Child in Time and the Mars Runner too. Let's go ahead and let's play the prologue and the first chapter of The Galaxy Chasers. The Galaxy Chasers. Written and read by Rick Goldman. Produced by Jay Wen. This book is dedicated to all of the science fiction authors that filled my mind with awe and wonder when I was a child. To Karen P. and Bill G. for proofreading and encouraging me through the process. Prologue. Colonel Vince Johnson sat at the control panel of the Galaxy ship Explorer. He was over 7 billion light years from home, and his ship limped towards a distant star system. The Explorer lost its galaxy drive when an O-ring in the injector system failed. Planet side, the repairs would take a day, maybe 2 at the most. They would pull out the device manifold, replace the injector O-ring, put it back together. There was no way to replace it in space. The most advanced drive system ever devised by humanity was rendered inert by a part that cost almost nothing. At least the ion drive came online, and the onboard computer plotted a star system where a habitable planet might exist. The bad news was the star system and planet were 17 years away at maximum ion propulsion. Johnson took a drink from his coffee cup and shook his head. At least the ship was still intact, and the power systems were more than adequate for the challenge. The crew was in hypersuspension. Hypersuspension protected them from the dangers endured during galaxy jumps. In their dreamless sleep, they would be unaware of the problem that had occurred. Vince took another drink and sat back in his chair. For the last 6 or 7 times, he had set his chamber to awaken him if an alarm on the ship was generated, or at 6-month interval. Each period he was awake, he would thoroughly inspect the ship and check for any damage by space debris. Johnson saw his scratch marks on the wall. 7. Only 13 and a half years to go. He looked out the window and let his mind drift back to the beginning. Chapter 1. How's retirement treating you? General Masters asked. Finally getting a chance to work on this old house, Vince replied as he spread his arms to show off the new coat of paint on his ranch. How are you, Sam? Can't complain, the general answered. So why do you want to drag me out of retirement this time? Vince said with a smile. Are you still looking for someone to command the mission to the ringed asteroid past Saturn? The general returned the smile. He had that coming and accepted it like the true gentleman he was. Rob and his crew are taking out the new Delta class spaceship to investigate that anomaly. I have something much bigger in store for you if I can pull you away from all of this, the general replied as he looked around the house that Vince was working on. Vince had retired a few years ago at the age of 51. He had spent much of the last 20 years ferrying people back and forth to the moon and Mars. He just wanted to feel real gravity again and breathe fresh air. He kept himself in shape and busy working on his house and teaching part-time at the college. Every so often, General Masters would check in on him and see if he could pull him back into the Space Force for one more mission. Vince had resisted the temptation so far. What is it this time, Sam? He asked. Uranians radiating Neptune? Do you remember that mote? The general asked, suddenly displaying a serious look on his face. The mote was a strange aberration that the Outlier Space Telescope had discovered several years ago. It was located at the farthest regions of the universe. Just that it was something that couldn't be explained. Damn, the thing's located almost 14 billion light years from here. It's moving, expanding, General Masters said. What can we do about it? Vince asked. Explore it, Masters answered. How? Send a probe? It would take billions of years to get it there, Vince replied. We built 2 Delta-class ships, the general stated. One ship is going to Cheroklo, the ringed asteroid. The other one is being fitted with an experimental galaxy drive. We're going to send that out to investigate the mote. That's crazy, Vince replied. What do you hope to find? We don't know. But if it's what we think it is, we need to know, General Masters said. Even if by some miracle a galaxy ship makes it all the way out there, how could they let you know what they found? Vince Johnson asked. The look on his face was disbelief. The general sighed. One step at a time, he said. Well, that's encouraging, Vince added sarcastically. I'll tell you what. Come by the Space Center. If you decide to pass, I'll never, I promise, never bother you again. The general handed Vince an envelope and turned to leave. Vince should have ripped up the envelope and ran away as fast as he could. He didn't. Instead, he took General Masters' invitation and visited the space facility a month later. The dark, threatening clouds at the normally sunny Space Center should have been an ominous warning to Vince. Area 51 had always been the ultra top secret facility where cutting-edge science came to life. This was where the Space Force was based. All the great minds came here to play. From alien technology to experiment fresh off the drawing boards, Area 51 was the proving ground. General Masters greeted the retired colonel at the landing strip and escorted him through the maze of security. I'm glad you decided to visit, Masters said. At the very least, I should see what I'm turning down, Vince replied. The general just laughed. Delta 1 is almost completed. Rob and his crew are training for their mission to Cheroklo, and Javi has installed the galaxy drive on Delta 2. Who is Javi? Vince asked. Javi, General Masters explained, is the mastermind that invented the galaxy drive. How does it work? Vince asked. Damned if I know, the general confessed. Both men entered a nondescript building and walked over to the elevators. They were scanned, and Elevator 1 opened its doors. Elevator opened at the sublevel 2. It was an enormous area the size of almost 2 football fields side by side. The ceiling was well over 3 stories above the floor. In the middle of it was the partially assembled structure of the Delta II galaxy ship. The galaxy ship was bullet-shaped in its contracted state. However, there was a lot more than met the eye. The outer shelf felt rubbery, pliable, almost skin like. Vince had never experienced anything like that before. When he touched it, it almost seemed to respond to him. What kind of material is this? He asked. It's called corbomite, General Masters replied. The ploy from Star Trek? Vince interjected. Javi was a big fan of the original series with Captain Kirk. He named the material he created to cover the ship after an element Kirk used to bluff an alien, corbomite. This ship can generate a subspace field that makes it part of space itself. It can project itself in another galaxy almost instantaneously, Master said. I can't even begin to understand how. That's unbelievable, Vince Johnson exclaimed. Where is the super genius that created this? General Masters called out in a steady voice, Javi, someone is here to meet you. From the backside of Delta 2, two young children emerged and walked towards them. Javi, this is Colonel Johnson. The child looked at Vince with interest. Johnson was shocked. These kids can't be more than 10 years old. Are you telling me he created this?
We're actually 13, the girl responded.
Vince looked at General Masters in disbelief. Before he could say anything, the general spoke. This is Rebecca, Javi's twin sister. She is the only person who can communicate with him. When Javi was young, he was diagnosed with a learning disability. His parents were going to send him away to an institution. The doctor that was sent to examine him noticed that Javi was doodling on a piece of paper. Those doodles turned out to be some highly advanced equations. The doctor also discovered that he was communicating with his twin sister telepathically. Both kids were re-evaluated, and it was discovered that Javi was a savant. Rebecca speaks for him. Rebecca spoke next.
When Javi was 4, he calculated pi out to 10,000 digits before anyone stopped him. He'd still be calculating pi if we didn't stop him. I have the notebook to prove it. My brother sees the unseeable.
Javi chose you for this mission, General Masters stated.
He did, Rebecca agreed. In his opinion, you are the only person who can do this. We don't know why. Javi just knows that if this mission has any chance at all, you have to be the commander.
A 13-year-old boy chose me, Vince exclaimed. Simply put, yes, General Masters said. Vince looked at Javi, and the boy was smiling. And there you have it.
That was great, Rick. You did a great job on kind of paint a pictures where it started. How did you approach crafting such intricate details about the spaceship technology?
I'll tell you, that was one of those crazy moments. I was sitting pretty much in this room before it was a studio, and I had my feet up on the desk one night, and I was kind of thinking about a story. And I was thinking about, wow, it would be, can you imagine like a guy floating in space and his engine's broken down and he's trying to think about, wow, what the heck happened to the super thing? And it dies on him and he's going through that. And from that, the rest of the story just kind of started coming into it. And the detail of the ship and him calling the shell Corbomite was just something from, like I said, being a fan of the original Star Trek series and thinking about Corbomite. The kid, the super genius, is such an intricate part of this story and what he comes up with and the stories that ensue as we get into this. Next podcast, we're going to go into more of probably chapters 2 and 3, and you'll get to hear more about Javi's personality and the way the ship is built. That's going to be a fun adventure, and I hope that people will, be back to be able to watch that. And as a reminder that you can go to RickGoldmanAuthor.com and you can, send me a message or follow me on Facebook and all of that stuff. And I would definitely hope to have you do that. The other things I'd like to give accolades to while we're doing this is the company 11 Labs, because they provided me the ability to do some of the voices using my own personality, and then being able to generate it into different voices using my personality in it, so that if I had to have people in here, there's no way I could afford to do this.
Hmm. What was it hard for you to go through all the voices?
I do all the male voices, and as you'll see, they vary a little bit. And there's some that are pretty darn strange too that I had fun with. But the female voices, I was able to just, I'd be talking like I am with you, and I'd be, having some emotion, and it would come out in the voice I wanted it to come out with. And that is just incredible.
Mm.
And also, I want to give a shout out to Epidemic Sounds for some of the sound effects and musical backgrounds and things like that that I'm incorporating into the books also. They have some pretty spectacular stuff too.
All the sound effects, change all the AI voices, put it in there. It's amazing.
They came a long way with that, and I'm sure that some people, have mixed emotions about it. I'm not one for text to speech, but from speech to speech, it's incredible, and it's really
Yeah.
a lot of fun to use.
Yeah, I remember we used to have a Windows 95. I don't think we can do that back then with floppy disk. So
Oh my God. I think of my first computer that I wrote the third link on. It was a PC Junior. It didn't even have a hard drive, and it had like the 5.25-inch floppy. You'd throw it in there and do that kind of stuff. But one of the things that I'm really thrilled about, and one of the things that I love, is the technology. I've always been a computer geek and all of that. And through, the many careers that I've had, I have come up with so many different forms of ideas that are sci-fi oriented and everything, that I can really have a lot of fun with that. And a lot of the, compliments that I want to pay out to you, because you've been the mastermind behind, you know, the audition software for me and introducing me to some of these other programs that I've had to learn from the ground out. And I wouldn't have been able to do that without you either. So you're probably like you know, the man behind the cloth, pay no attention to the man behind.
No, thanks, Rick. I mean, one thing is we definitely learned together about this project. So I thought it was really cool you letting me working with you with this project. So thank you for that.
Well, I appreciate you, man. And I just want to thank all the people that helped build my studio for me, the people that have been there and encouraged me through this. My family, my friends. It's been such a joint effort. I couldn't have done it without everyone. And I have a saying that, most people think I'm crazy, but my friends have no doubt. And I and they hear these things I'm doing, and they've proofread this stuff, and they've helped me edit it, and they encourage me, and they just sit there sometimes and they're laughing because they're going, oh my God, what's he going to come up with next? And you guys
Yeah,
will see, and that's the fun part about it.
it is. I mean, it is fun. I mean, I can't say it's not every day I get to help an author written several books on one of his projects. So it's really cool and an honor for me. So I thought it's also because when you read your book, when somebody reads your book, they can almost tell that you have some kind of tech background almost. The way how you went into really detail, especially with Child in Time, some of that stuff is like, wow. I mean, stuff went over my head a lot of time. You go into detail on certain things in there that only I would say either you have done your research really, really well, or that's something that you're really interesting in. So
Like most people who write fiction or science fiction, I, I'm a pretty good liar.
yeah.
and but also I have lived some of the stuff with some of the technology that I've presented in that, because that was in the course of many of my careers. Yeah, I've been an electronics technician and worked on printed circuit boards in almost everything from initial assembly through pulling them out of machines when they went bad and analyzing them and repairing them. And also, I was a computer programmer for a while, so I know code and I know how to troubleshoot things that way. And I've done a lot of things that have been very technology based, and I've been blessed to have the opportunity to do that stuff, and being able to present projections of some of that stuff in my stories help end that little believability, because I can tell a lie, but it's got to be believable, otherwise people are going to go, man, that's hokey. It's like one of the bad things about Lost in Space, the original series, was that they didn't have a technology background. They talk about things that were just completely not capable of even close to being what could be true or anything. But
Mm.
it was entertaining, and that was
Yeah.
half of the fun of it too.
That was great, Rick.
Let's go ahead and wrap this up and leave people dangling just a little bit so they'll come back the next time, or probably try to do this once a week and get another episode out of the Galaxy Chasers next week. Jay, thank you, my friend. It's always good to spend time with you.
Yeah, same ways, Rick. We'll continue to put out some more episodes in the future, and since this is the first time, it's it's learning curve that we're gonna try to do, but I think we're getting there. So
Hey, you can't get to point B unless you come through point A first. And
that's right.
I hope people will forgive the foibles of the introductory episode. But hey, thanks for listening if you get this, and we'll see you next week.
All right, guys, take care.